In 2025, Canadians, those kind, polite, America-loving neighbors, turned their backs on some of the biggest US brands. But it wasn't through angry protests or loud marches. It was through a quiet, powerful act of defiance. They simply stopped buying. Sounds crazy, right? But this is the new reality, and the wave of change spread like wildfire. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why these 9 US brands were caught in the crossfire. And trust me, you won't believe what happens in the number 5 spot. This could completely change the way you see consumer power and the role of national pride. Ready to be shocked? Let's dive in. 1. Walmart, the quiet exit. Let's start with the retail giant, Walmart. It used to be the one-stop shop for anything and everything. Cheap, convenient, quick, and always there when you needed it. But in 2025, Canadians quietly voted with their wallets, and they turned their backs on the retail giant. When tariffs hit, many Canadians began to feel like Walmart wasn't an ally anymore. Instead of lining up at self-checkouts or piling their carts high, they took their business elsewhere. Local grocery stores, once overlooked, saw an unexpected surge in demand. The Shop Canadian First movement began spreading like wildfire. Walmart's traffic dropped by a staggering 31% in just 2 months. What was once the convenience of an everyday shopping experience now became a reminder of what Canadians wanted to support: community, loyalty, and local values. 2. McDonald's, a Big Mac no more. Now, let's talk about McDonald's, a place that, for decades, has been the familiar face of fast food, comfort food for busy families. But in 2025, things started to change. Canadians quietly began to turn away from the golden arches. It wasn't because the food changed. No, it was something deeper than that. One mother from Mississauga shared how her child asked, "Why don't we eat something from our own country?" And that question made her rethink everything. Soon after, they started going to local restaurants where the ingredients came from nearby farms. In just a matter of weeks, local restaurants saw a massive 40% increase in sales. Meanwhile, McDonald's sales plummeted by 16%. It wasn't just about convenience anymore. It was about pride. It was about supporting local businesses over a multinational corporation. And it wasn't just about food. It was about community and identity. This was an act of defiance without a single protest sign being raised. It was a quiet revolution of choice. 3. The Amazon Exodus, the e-commerce titan, the company that made shopping easier than ever. But in 2025, something shifted. Canadians started to walk away. And it wasn't because they hated Amazon, it was because they no longer trusted the system. Tariffs had pushed the prices of imported goods to new highs. And with every click, Canadians felt they were fueling a machine they no longer believed in. In just 2 months, Amazon Prime cancellations in Canada surged by 24%. But the real story, Canadians weren't just abandoning Amazon. They were flocking to local platforms. Apps like Local Loop became wildly popular, connecting Canadians with homegrown retailers. The tide had turned. More and more, Canadians were choosing to support their own, and they were doing it in a quiet, decisive way. 4. Coca-Cola, the sip of rejection. A brand that's as iconic as America itself. The fizzy drink that's been a part of family meals, summer picnics, and stadium cheers for decades. But in 2025, something unexpected happened. After the tariffs hit, Canadians just stopped drinking Coke, not out of hate or protest, but simply because they felt that Coke no longer aligned with the values they wanted to support. Within a few weeks, Coca-Cola's revenue in Canada dropped by 27%. Instead, Canadians began choosing local soda brands. Restaurants swapped Coke for Canada Dry. Movie theaters put up signs that read "Coke-free zone." And a small-town restaurant in Nova Scotia proudly showcased local sodas. Coca-Cola's attempt at damage control came too late. a limited edition Northern Lights can wasn't enough to win back the loyalty that had been quietly lost. And this wasn't just about a soft drink, it was about national pride. Coca-Cola had become a symbol of something foreign, something that no longer represented the community values Canadians held dear. The question was simple: could a sip of soda really be a silent act of defiance? 5. Harley-Davidson's fall from grace. Wait until you hear this. Harley-Davidson. For decades, it's been the embodiment of freedom, rebellion, and the open road, a symbol for anyone who's ever wanted to break free. But after the tariffs hit, Canadians, once loyal fans, began to walk away from the brand. In just 3 months, Harley-Davidson's Canadian sales dropped by more than 35%. Dealerships in places like Alberta were forced to close temporarily. Even the hardcore biker community, which once viewed Harley as the symbol of freedom, started to question their loyalty. One rider from Manitoba shared how he used to feel proud to take his Harley on the road. But now, he couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't the bike, it was what it represented. After weeks of hesitation, he decided to sell his Harley. And he wasn't the only one. When a symbol of freedom turns its back on those who once revered it, can it still stand for anything? It was more than a motorcycle. It was about identity. And when that identity was questioned, so too was the loyalty of Canadians. 6. Nike, the silent shift. And now, the unthinkable, Nike. Once the global brand that inspired millions, known for its Just Do It slogan and its iconic sneakers. But in 2025, Nike found itself at the center of a quiet rebellion. After the tariffs hit, Canadians began turning away from the brand. Nike's sales dropped by 22% in key provinces like Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Meanwhile, local shoe brands focused on sustainability and ethical production started to soar. One designer from Vancouver, once a Nike collector, shared how he switched to a local shoe brand after learning more about sustainable practices. It wasn't just about the shoes anymore. It was about the message they represented. Canadians weren't just rejecting a product. They were rejecting the values they felt Nike represented. And it wasn't just one person. It was a wave of young people who started to question the brands they had once idolized. 7. Starbucks, the coffee crisis. The global coffee giant that seemed invincible. But in 2025, Canadians began to quietly turn away. After the tariffs, Starbucks felt the impact hard. In just 3 months, their revenue dropped by 22%. But what's really interesting, Canadians weren't just leaving Starbucks for the sake of coffee. They were turning to local coffee shops. And those local shops saw a massive 300% increase in sales. This wasn't just about switching coffee preferences. It was a silent protest. It was about making a choice to support local businesses over global giants. It was about saying no to overpriced coffee and yes to community. It's not just about the drink anymore. It's about the values we want to preserve, even in the smallest decisions. 8. KFC, the chicken crisis, once a staple in Canadian homes, especially during family gatherings. But in 2025, even the familiar comfort of fried chicken began to lose its grip. Tariffs pushed the prices of KFC meals higher. And Canadians began to ask, why support this when we can support our own? In just a few months, KFC's sales dropped by 19% in key provinces like Ontario and Alberta. Meanwhile, local chains like Mary Brown's and Chester's saw a surge in customers. It wasn't just about taste, it was about loyalty. It was about the pride in supporting local businesses over multinational chains. And it was about what Canadians were willing to stand for in a time when their choices really mattered. 9. The beer boycott, Budweiser's final cheers. And finally, the beer boycott. Yes, you heard that right. In 2025, Budweiser lost 28% of its market share in Canada. Meanwhile, local craft beers saw their sales skyrocket. Bars in places like Halifax, Montreal, and Calgary began proudly displaying signs that read, "Craft beer only." One beer distributor in Manitoba shared how his once loyal customers had switched to other beers. But the switch wasn't just about preference. It was about standing with local producers, about supporting the community. Here's the real kicker. This isn't just about boycotts. It's about the choices we make every single day. From where we buy our coffee, to what brands we support, and even where we send our kids to school. Every decision is a statement, a reflection of who we are, what we stand for, and what kind of world we want to create. So let me ask you, have you ever changed your habits for a reason greater than yourself? For your community? For your values? Or just because it felt right? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And don't forget, if you want to stay in the loop about these mind-blowing stories, hit that subscribe button. We've got more to uncover, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we continue to explore how the smallest choices make the biggest impacts. Stay tuned.